More and more over the past couple of years, I've seen more and more random YouTubers that I've never heard of kind of casually admit that, like, oh yeah, these days I'm only playing Nintendo games. The Harmon Smith way of thinking, that Nintendo gaming is superior, is starting to catch on with more less committed gaming YouTubers, right? It's starting to become acknowledged that Nintendo software is simply better. And I'm very curious how this is going to affect the community because I think it's going to be harder and harder to push narratives like how nobody is talking about Tears of the Kingdom when like you have a bunch of gaming YouTubers like this talking about Tears of the Kingdom, talking about Super Mario Bros. Wonder, talking about like whatever major Nintendo game has come out this week, right? The narrative that nobody was talking about Tears of the Kingdom didn't even really last like I don't know, a couple of months after people introduced it. Like, it's already dead. To be completely honest with you, we're still talking about the game in 2024, but like, it was one of those coordinated attempts by like established gaming YouTubers to try and introduce a narrative, to try and push another product in its place. Whether it was like Spider-Man 2 or Baldur's Gate 3 or Starfield, like it mostly depended on like your console allegiance and what your gaming partnerships were like. And that's kind of what I want to call out Angry Joe for because I'm pretty sure the primary reason he's shilling for certain products, like the products he covers on the channel, the games he talks about, the movies he covers, like it's entirely because of established partnerships and not because he actually cares about the games. Because it's becoming more and more apparent if you watch Angry Joe, if you listen to his statements, if you watch his streams, like it could not be more apparent that Angry Joe is not a gamer. And I've seen a lot of people address this, how he's like a poser, how he doesn't know what he's talking about, how he's not a real fan of like certain brands, how he like, aggressively downplayed Mario and Zelda, right? How aggressively he downplays Nintendo in general, right? Like it's becoming more commonly known and understood that he does this and he's not alone. But like right now, we're still in this weird era where a lot of their gaming audience hasn't really caught on to this yet. The audience of these kind of YouTubers haven't really generated enough backlash to these obvious sponsorships, these obvious deals, right? They think Angry Joe is just playing Darksiders 3 on stream, when in reality, THQ Nordic paid him to do that. They think he's praising Resident Evil 4 VR just because he wants to play Resident Evil 4 VR, but in reality, Meta paid him for that. He admitted on a later stream when they announced the Resident Evil 4 remake that he never played more than a couple of hours of it, right? So this gives you like a context as to what most of these YouTubers are like, right? Where most of them are playing games for money. They talk about games for money. They don't actually care about the hobby. They don't actually care about like what actual gamers care about. They care about getting views, getting clicks, and I think more than ever, getting those partnership deals. Because anybody who knows how like what ad revenue is like on YouTube nowadays, people who know how unwilling people are to donate to you, even if you're like a very big YouTuber, just look at the completionist. Like when you see just how difficult it is to actually make money on YouTube, like it's obvious that the main source of income for these people, the thing that is making them millionaires, the thing that's bringing in the dosh, right? It's primarily these partnership deals. And it is primarily to sell you on this idea that Baldur's Gate 3 is the game of the year. You know, they sell you on this idea that like Starfield is a good game or Spider-Man 2 is a good game. And they try to steer you away from Nintendo hardware, but they don't really do that to the same extent. Like their partnership program, they'll send you free stuff and they'll give you guidelines as to what you're supposed to say and what you're not supposed to talk about, and you're supposed to like respect the review embargo. But in general, like they're not nearly there is like some speculation on this. Arlo, I think, hasn't been as critical of modern Paper Mario games as he has been ever since he joined the program. So I think to a certain extent, Nintendo controls their partners as well, right? But again, that's not something I would ever support, right? Like I'll come out and say this that I wouldn't support I would never support the Nintendo partnership program either, because like, I kind of value my freedom to say whatever I want about their products. And to me, I think a lot of YouTubers don't have any integrity. Like, I think most of them are mostly in it to get money, mostly in it to get famous, mostly in it to like go to conventions and like uh, have sex with cosplayers, right? Like, I'm sure that's why they're doing this. Like, it's not about the video games. It never was. It was entirely to grift and make money off of a hobby that you don't really care about all that much. And I think this is true for Arlo. I think it's true for Angry Joe. I think it's true for Scott the Waz. I think it's true for a lot of people out there. But more and more, I think there are like, actual gamers who are becoming YouTubers. People like me who are just casually coming out there and saying Nintendo is better, and that opinion isn't getting shouted down the way it did when I got started, right? That opinion isn't being like disregarded the way that like it used to, right? Like more and more, I think that opinion is starting to become mainstream. And more, I think the YouTubers and game journalists whose job it is to downplay Nintendo and like try to like attack their hardware and pretend it's just for kids or whatever. Like they're struggling. They are struggling to control the narrative. Like we saw Angry Joe like aggressively go after the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Like I'm sure on orders from like his corporate masters or whatever, and like he just couldn't do it. Right? He's tried to shill for Disney movies. He just couldn't do it. He tried to shill for like Lord of the Rings and She-Hulk. He couldn't do it. Right? Like these YouTubers, in defending these bad products while downplaying good ones, are losing the trust of their audience. And I think the only YouTubers that have like the kind of parasocial relationship that like Angry Joe and the Completionist used to enjoy, like those are the older established ones. Like younger ones are never going to have the same kind of attachment to YouTubers the way that like millennials did to like the first batch of E-celebs, right? Because there's just too many options. Like when Scott the Waz falls off, like you just know the vast majority of his audience is just going to like go off to like the next copycat, the younger guy, right? Like it's gonna happen. Like nobody is going to be attached to Scott the Waz the way they were attached to James. Like even now, Scott the Waz, I think, is mostly relevant because like he's associated with James to some capacity, right? He's like a younger Pat the NES Punk, right? In that regard, like, but he's never going to be as notable, as well regarded, well respected, or like leave as big of a mark on the history of the genre as James Rolfe did, right? Because nothing he did was all that innovative, right? When Scott did it, like it was already old hat, like it was already like played out, right? And in a lot of ways, I don't know if younger YouTubers will ever be able to do it, right? Because gaming has grown and people are just going to fall off into their niche, follow smaller channels, get invested in like a lot of different personalities, and get a lot of different opinions. And when you get a lot of different opinions, it's really, really, really difficult to fabricate a narrative, right? It was it was interesting seeing like the narratives put forward about like certain Nintendo games over the past couple of years and see how they fell flat on their face. Like the whole Breath of the Wild thing. Oh, it's just a Ubisoft open world. Like fell apart. Like it didn't stick at all. Like when you look at like New Horizons or like Metroid Dread, I remember people saying that like nobody cares about Metroid Dread. It's not that big of a deal, but like it's the best selling Metroid game ever now, right? When you look at like how these games are doing and how like the community desperately tries downplaying all of them, like Super Mario Bros. Wonder being the most recent example, Tears of the Kingdom probably being the most egregious this past year. Like when you look at like the narratives that are put forward, like the the claims are becoming more and more ridiculous, more and more unfathomable, like nobody is talking about Tears of the Kingdom. Like, come on, bro. Like, it's one of the most popular games of the year. Like, you are delusional if you think nobody is talking about it. It's just absurd to me that was like seriously the line they decided to go with. I think I think in this day and age, more and more like the classic gaming YouTuber is going to fall by the wayside. I think more and more people are going to be a lot more critical of these people. They're going to be a lot more discerning. They're going to start noticing like the deals, like the narratives being pushed, the agenda. And it's not just about like woke SJW stuff. It's about like brands. It's about like getting those partnership deals. It's about like keeping yourself relevant. It's about like uh, going after brands that don't enable you, like with Nintendo and Angry Joe. Like it's about like it's not about actually talking about good video games. And with that in mind, the gaming YouTube community is absolutely not something we should be taking seriously.